Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Programming with Coach 2Js. We are talking about the Competition and Lifting Calendar 2018. So I call this the macro calendar, and I just want to do a quick video and kind of explaining what we're looking at so you guys have a better idea of how to use this tool and kind of use it to tailor your own programming to get the best results through the training season. So the way we set this up is, back years ago, we started to realize that there was a difference between the different levels of athletes. So if somebody is training to do the best in the open, or even just barely trying to make regionals as an individual for their first time, they're going to have a slightly different calendar or training focus throughout the year compared to somebody who's going to the games. So for all the people that I've coached that are pretty consistent games athletes or people who are on teams that have gone to the games, just as a brief overview, I've had over 88 people make it to regionals or the games in different years. I coached the games 8 times. I've had multiple teams podium at the games. I've had multiple individuals go to the games. I've had one tie for podium at the games. I've had masters go to the games and podium. And so I've seen lots of different avenues for different athletes. So what we realized was that there can be a slightly different focus depending on which part of the spectrum you're at. So let's talk about that first. So you'll see here that there's 5 categories. There's amateur, which is more of just prepping for the open, trying to do the best as possible for the open, maybe make regionals on a team. There's something I would call semi-pro, and this is somebody who they're going to try to do well at regionals. And they're probably either as an individual or they're going to be on a team. And then there's the masters, and they're kind of their own category. And then there's semi-pro, and these are people who are probably going to go to the games on the team or really close, or people who expect to do well at the games or at regionals. And then there's the professional, people who really don't need to worry about the open. They can do the open sick and tired and not disrupt their training at all, and they're still going to make regionals and have a good shot at making the games. So for the most part, this works best for those bottom 4 categories. Obviously, if you're the type of athlete who's made the games before, who isn't really, is just trying to make sure that they do well at the games, you need to be working with someone like me or another coach directly to really customize the programming to get every moment of your training and life honed in on that goal. So this is really more for all the people from the below categories, but I left it in there as kind of an example. And so now let's talk about the 2 different sort of colors we see here. We see the blue, which is a strength and OLE focus, and then sort of the red, which is more of a Metcon focus. And one of the things I really want to emphasize is that the Metcon focus and the OLE focus are just shades of gray. We're never only doing strength, and we're never only doing Metcon. It's really just a slight tweak to your programming, so that if you tend to do really well engine wise, and you tend to do really well on the long workouts with lots of reps and lower weights, you might need to spend more time in the strength OLE focus. And if you're somebody who's already kind of on the stronger side compared to people of a similar level to you, but then you always struggle with engine because maybe you're just more fast twitch muscles, and you tend to struggle with those longer workouts or those workouts with high repetitions, then you might want to spend more time in doing some Metcon focus before the different competitions. So that's kind of where we're at. But it should be, like I said, if you follow the program exactly as written, it's gonna follow a similar focus for just about everybody until February or March, and that's when we start to shift things for the different classes of athlete. And so you can see the notes here for the strength OLE focus. We're prioritizing the lifting and the progressions. We want to cut back on Metcon volume and monostructural work if time recovery is an issue. If you're recovering fine and you have the time, you should hit everything that's written down in the programming. But again, if those things become an issue, or maybe you have another glaring weakness or a movement that you need to spend some time developing, you might cut some of those things out to go work on that movement. So that's when we're doing this the strength or OLE focus, if you will. Like I said, it's really not it's not a huge focus. It's more of just a slight shift in the in where for the extra flexible time we have toward that goal. Now the Metcon focus, we're gonna still be lifting and doing progressions just about every single training session. So we're going to pick one or two that are to really focus on. So, for example, if you tend to do well with the shoulder to overhead movements, any kind of pressing movement, and maybe you're also really good at pulling, your cleans and your deadlifts are up there, but then your squats, you're not a good squatter, your body type's not a good squatter, you're going to make sure that you do the squats, the squats for each cycle to the best of your ability, and you put the most time and effort into that. And those other ones, maybe you dial them back by 10%, from the prescribed amounts. And that's going to allow you to have more time and more energy to put toward the Metcons and the other skill work and things. And so in the monostructural and aerobic pieces, and you can try to do both. But again, if you have to pick and choose, you're going to want to lean toward the side that's going to give you more of an engine focus. So those are the two kind of main categories. Now what I've done is I've broken this out. Each month is basically broken out into 2-week blocks. So it's not exact, but it's going to give you some idea of where you should be at on your different foci. I think what the right word is. So the 2017 dates, they haven't announced as far as I know yet, was again late February, early March was the Open. The Masters was in kind of mid to late April. The Regionals was in May, and then the Games was in early August. And you can see that that for the most part, throughout the summer, we did this Metcon focus going into the game season, and then we're going to go into this strength and Oli focus through the fall. Now, at some point, I really do prefer, again, depending on your experience level. Now, if you're a very experienced person, you've been doing this for 4 or more years and competing for that long, you may not need this test. But I like to have people do some sort of prep, and that's what these blue lines are. Is a competition or even a virtual competition that's going to allow you to get some detailed data on the Metcon ramp up. And while again we're planning on a full season, I have seen a huge benefit to people spending the bulk of their year focusing on skills and strength in Olympic development, and then the engine development, they can really take it from 80% to 98% in a matter of 4 to 8 weeks. And so if you're not really sure how much ramp up you should have, this is our test period. So starting at basically around the beginning of November, for about 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 weeks, you're going to ramp up your Metcons. So you're going to put those kind of lifts a little bit on the back burner and work more time on developing your engine. And what this is going to allow you to do is then, because almost every major CrossFit or functional fitness competition, over the period of 2 or 3 days, we're doing multiple workouts, and the vast majority are testing that work capacity. And so by having we're spending the extra time building the engine going into those tests, we're going to see a little bit higher performances and higher finishes after the workouts. The other thing about strength and Oli lifting and maybe not doing that going into the competition or whatever is that if we continue to kind of push ourselves on the strength and Oli front, there's a slight chance there could be a little bit of an injury or a tweak that could really upset the performances going into the competition. This is very true for regionals and the games. And so there's kind of a cost to benefit analysis going on. Like if you continue to do your normal, the training, and you're really pushing yourself on the strength wise, your engine may be reduced by a little bit of a percentage. But if you do get one of those nagging tweaks because of a lift that went bad, that could really offset your entire season. And so it's a little bit safer long-term wise to say, you know what, I'm going to just put all these other lifts. I'm still going to progress on the one lift that I know that I know it's going to give me the best benefit, but then take that extra time and energy and devote it to building a bigger engine so that, across 6 workouts over 3 days, your lift is going to be your lift, but those other workouts, you're going to see a significant improvement because you've built the engine. And so the reason why we test it here in the early winter, late fall, is that it's going to allow you to say, you know what, 4 weeks was plenty of time. I was pretty maxed out going into that after 4 weeks because engine's my thing. I benefit more by doing the strength for as long as possible. And then the other people are going to say, I'm a strength athlete and that tends to be my jam. So then I needed more like 6 or 8 weeks of kind of Metcon ramp up going into that competition to make sure I got my best overall score. And so that's sort of the test. We do that test through November, December. For those people who need that data. If you've only been competing for 2 or 3 years, this is a really good idea to do. You'll also notice kind of in late November, we also want this sort of injury or GOAT check-in in early November. And that means that like if you struggle with muscle ups, if you're not really good at squat snatches, if you're whenever you see a workout that has double unders, you dread it. This is a time for you to say, you know what, I need to get this straightened out now. I need to talk to a specialist. I need to set up a routine for practicing. I need to work on my mobility. If you have a bad shoulder, a bad back, or any of those things, if you start it in November, you can get that stuff corrected before the Open happens in late February, and definitely before May. In fact, before the regionals, that you could turn a weakness into a pretty significant strength depending on what it is. But it only happens if you have that sort of check-in early on. Now, if we're thinking about that now, 6 months in advance. So now that we have that data, we're going to go back to our more strength and Oli focus and skill focus, where we're going to be developing those gymnastics and strength skills. And then starting, depending on where you're at. So the amateur person is going to be focusing a little bit more on the Open. So usually in late January, early February, you're going to want to put work on the engine. What we've seen traditionally is that there's a lot more engine style workouts in the Open, and usually there's only one workout that really tests strength, and it usually tests a particular lift. And so depending on what that lift is, you may or may not be able to even exhibit it if you've been practicing it or not. So instead of trying to be overall completely strong and have your engine much less than it could be, it just makes more sense to again focus on the one lift that you need to make the most gains on, and then really build that engine going back into January. And then that's going to carry throughout the Open, because one thing we want to remember is that the Open is 5 weeks long, so we need to make sure we maintain that level throughout the 5 weeks. Now for the semi-pro and sort of amateur, these are people who are kind of hoping to do well at regionals as individuals on a team. The Open shouldn't be much of an issue. If you're at that level, then even being a little bit more strength and Olympic and skill focused, you shouldn't have to max out your engine, because your performances, you're gonna make regionals, even if you don't have the best Open you've ever had. So we continue to work on those other skills until the Open, and then we start working on the Open, so that when we go to regionals, again, our engine is completely set up. Now if somebody has that. They already have they're more engine based. They like the lower weights, high reps. They may continue with the strength Oli focus farther into the year, and then maybe only 4 or 6 weeks before regionals start focusing on that. So now we go to the Masters. The Masters are going to have to focus on the Metcon similar to the amateurs before the Open, just because it tends to be such an important piece to get people to the Masters regional. And we were going to use this to basically do a Metcon focus all the way until the Masters regional, where for most of the people I've worked with, it hasn't, in the last few years they've had a Masters regional. It's not the hardest to get into that Masters regional, but it's really tough to make the Masters, to make the games. And because they've always been carrying forward your score in the Open as one of your rankings for the Masters regional, it's really important that you do well in the Open overall. So we're gonna do some more Metcon focus before the Open, and then carry that through. But between the Open and then some games prep, we're gonna go back to skill and strength development, and then again going into the games, we're gonna go back to that Metcon focus. And the last one I'll talk about here is the semi-pro. So semi-pro, again, this is a lot for a lot of team athletes. If you guys have a solid team, or you have a team of people that have made regionals before and you're really trying to make the games, this is kind of who we're talking about. Again, you shouldn't have to do a ton of engine development, especially if your gym, you should be having a group of athletes, not just the 6 that you plan on sending to regionals and the games. There should be another 6, at least 12 athletes that are going to help you in the Open make regionals. You shouldn't be that worried about regionals. If your plan is to do well at regionals and make the games, you need to be able to make regionals in the top 10 or top 20 without trying that hard. Especially when you're using these other people who might specialize or just be really good at that particular workout. and so you shouldn't have to do too much engine development. That being said, right about middle of the Open or right after the Open, you're going to start doing a much bigger engine development all the way through regionals and the games to make sure that you're fully maxed out on that kind of cardio side, if you will. So one other thing I wanted to mention, I know this video is running kind of long, is the different lifts. And so I went back and as usual, I look at all the movements that we see in the Open and the regionals and the games, and I want to make sure that my predictions are accurate. And this is one of the things that I'm really adamant about, is that when we're creating programming to help prepare people for regionals and the games, it's not about looking back at what we've done over the past so many years. It's also trying to predict what's coming down in the future. And so I see a lot of programmers, I see a lot of athletes always trying to do what was done in the past and not trying to get in the head a little bit of Dave Castro and all the people who planned for the CrossFit Games and try to think about where they're going to go next. And so we always want to make sure that our programming and that our training isn't just looking backward, but it's also thinking forward. And so I always look back and see, okay, what did we do and how did that fit into the mold? You know, I've been pretty consistent with a lot of this stuff. You know, I was one of the first programmers to do a lot of carries and lunges and some of those things, and some of the more advanced gymnastics movements like, weighted muscle ups and deficit handstand push-ups and things like that. And so we see that coming forward. So you can see here we're already partway through October. I'm making this video. I think that I don't know, my spreadsheet cut this off, but I think it's November 13th is week 46. And you can see how we're doing the next focus will be power snatch, front squat, strict handstand push-up, chest to bar, strict toes to bar, overhead lunge. And again, strict toes to bar, are we going to see that at regionals? We might see that at some point, but it's also going to benefit us in other ways. And the way that these lifts are planned out is that they lean into each other from a performance standpoint. So you can see we're doing power snatches for 6 weeks, and then we do squat snatch. We're working snatch for 12 weeks, but we're building momentum throughout the year. The same thing goes, we go from front squat to back squat. The strict handstand push-ups are going to help people with their push press. And then the chest to bar is going to, or the strict toes to bar is going to help people with their kipping toes to bar. Then we're also going to work on pistols. And then after we do pistols, that's going to make people's box squats better and their squatting better. And so everything kind of leans into each other from a throughout the year standpoint. So we're looking to the next cycle or two going into it. And I've also planned these movements out. So for example, we're going to do, especially for regional athletes, the yoke and barbell walks is something, and farmer carriage is something that we could definitely see at regionals, because they like to see the visual movement of equipment and athletes from a spectator standpoint. So that's something that we're going to see a lot. The overhead lunge and the sled pushes are something we see in the games, and so we see those show up later on in the season. And so hopefully this helps explain some of what you're looking at when you look at this thing. Keep in mind that this is really a tool for you to try to, if you're wondering and there's a little bit of ambiguity about what you should be focusing on throughout the training season, this should help give you some guidance. Ultimately, if you know yourself and know your weaknesses, then you're going to be able to use this to plan out your entire year, which is going to make your season much more fruitful and a much better experience for you and everything. So hope this video makes a lot of sense. If you have any questions, you can always post them on the Facebook group or reach out to me through the Thrivistry site. And I can't wait to start this season and see you guys do awesome. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next video.